The termination letter slid across the metal desk without a sound, but it hit David Miller harder than a punch ever could. It was 5:03 in the afternoon. Shift change. The factory floor outside the office still hummed, steel grinding against steel machines, doing what they were told, never questioning, never hesitating. David stood there with his hands at his sides, oil still under his fingernails, his work jacket smelling of coolant and rust. He had not even taken it off yet. Across from him, Rick Harlan would not meet his eyes. "We don't have a choice," Rick said, tapping the paper with 2 fingers as if it were contagious. Corporate reviewed the incident. "Equipment failure. Safety violation. Your name is on the report." David felt his throat tighten. "That report was falsified. You know that." Rick's jaw clenched. He finally looked up, and for a split second, guilt flashed through his eyes. Then it disappeared, buried under something harder. Fear. Self-preservation. "They needed a name," Rick said quietly. "And yours was there." The words hung in the stale air. David understood them instantly. He had been the senior maintenance lead, 26 years in that plant, union rep before that. The one who filed complaints, the one who refused to sign off on shortcuts. When the conveyor nearly crushed a kid fresh out of high school last week, someone had rewritten the logs, and now that rewrite had a scapegoat. David exhaled slowly. He felt his pulse in his ears. "So that's it." Rick nodded once. Badge on the desk. The security guard at the door shifted his weight. A young guy. New. Would not look at him either. David placed his badge down. The plastic made a soft click. That sound stayed with him longer than the words. He walked out without arguing, without shouting, without begging. Men his age did not beg. They absorbed. They carried it home. Outside, the sky over Millstone, Pennsylvania, was the color of wet cement. The parking lot was half empty. Layoffs had been eating the town for years. David stood beside his truck for a moment, keys in his hand, and just breathed. Slow, controlled, like he had taught himself after Lily was born, and everything in his life became about staying steady, no matter what broke around him. The drive home felt longer than usual. Every red light stretched. Every familiar street felt slightly foreign, like it no longer recognized him. By the time he pulled into the gravel lot of the duplex, the sun was gone. Only one light was on. Their kitchen light. Lily would be at the table coloring, waiting for him. Always waiting. He sat in the truck for another moment, forehead resting against the steering wheel. Then he straightened, put on his face, and went inside. "Daddy?" Her voice came from the kitchen before he even shut the door. Small. Careful. Lily was 6, but she had learned early how to read a room. "I'm here, kiddo," David said, forcing warmth into his voice. She sat at the table with her crayons spread out, drawing the same thing she always drew lately. A house, a stick figure man, a smaller stick figure girl, holding his hand. Dinner was a peanut butter sandwich cut neatly in half, one half still untouched. "You're late," she said. Not accusing. Just stating. "Work ran long," he said. It was not a lie. Not completely. She studied his face. Her eyes were too observant for her age. "Did you eat?" He nodded. "Yeah." On the way. She pushed the other half of the sandwich toward him anyway. Just in case. Something in his chest cracked. He sat down and took a bite so she would not see it in his eyes. Later, after she was asleep, David stood in the kitchen holding the termination letter. He read it again. Words like policy, liability, immediate effect. No mention of the kid who almost died. No mention of the warnings David had filed. Just ink on paper deciding that a man in his mid-50s was now disposable. He folded the letter carefully and put it in the drawer with the unpaid bills. Then he opened his wallet. $18. Crumpled. A 5. 3 ones. Some change. That was it. The next evening, after walking Lily to Mrs. Calder's next door so she could watch her for an hour, David headed for the bus stop on 4th Street. The old one, by the abandoned diner. The town had stopped maintaining it years ago. The bench was cracked. The light flickered. The wind cut straight through his jacket. He sat down and stared at the street, replaying the meeting in his head. The look on Rick's face. The silence. The way the guard's hand hovered near his radio like David might explode. A bus hissed past without stopping. Wrong route. Then he heard it. Fast breathing. Shallow. Close. A woman stood a few feet away, digging through her purse with shaking hands. She dropped coins on the pavement, cursed under her breath, knelt to pick them up. Her coat was thin, her hair pulled back too tightly. Late 50s, maybe. The kind of face that had once commanded rooms, but had learned recently what it felt like to be ignored. She counted again. Her lips moved. She shook her head. "I'm short," she muttered. "Not to him. To the world." David did not look at her at first. He knew that sound. He had made it himself in grocery aisles, gas stations, hospital parking lots. She sighed, straightened, then turned toward him as if making a decision she hated. "I'm sorry," she said. Her voice was controlled, but the crack was there. "Do you have I just need a few dollars?" "The bus doesn't take cards." David met her eyes, really looked at her. Saw the pride bruised but not broken. Saw the fear beneath it. He reached into his wallet. $18. His last. His mind flashed forward. Lily in the morning. No milk, no eggs. The ache in his knees if he had to walk. The cold. Then it flashed backward. To a hospital room. To signing papers alone. To promising a tiny newborn he would never let the world swallow her whole. He held the bills out. All of it, he said. The woman stared. "I can't." "You can," David said. "And you should." Her hands trembled as she took the money. For a moment she looked like she might cry. Then she swallowed it down. "I'll pay you back," she said quickly. "I don't say things I don't mean." He nodded. He did not believe her. That was not the point. The bus arrived. She stepped on, then turned back once. Their eyes met. Something passed between them. Recognition. Not gratitude. Respect. The doors closed. The bus pulled away. David stood up slowly. His knees protested. He pulled his jacket tighter and started the long walk home. The street lights stretching ahead, like a test he had not studied for. He did not know that in less than 24 hours, 5 black SUVs would surround his house. He did not know that the woman on that bus was not who she appeared to be. He only knew that tonight he had nothing left, and somehow that felt heavier than the letter ever had. The knock came at 6:42 in the morning, sharp and deliberate, the kind that did not belong to neighbors or delivery drivers. David was already awake. He had been awake for hours, sitting at the small kitchen table with a mug of reheated coffee, listening to the refrigerator hum, like it was trying to remind him it still worked. Lily slept on the couch under a blanket, one sock kicked off in the night, her small chest rising and falling in a rhythm he counted without realizing he was doing it. The knock came again, louder this time. David stood slowly. His knees protested. He glanced out the front window and froze. 5 black SUVs lined the narrow street, their engines idling exhaust curling into the cold morning air. They did not belong here. Not on Maple Street. Not in a town where people drove rusted pickups and waved at each other out of habit. Men and women stood beside the vehicles. Coats, dark posture, rigid eyes, scanning houses like they were reading threat assessments instead of addresses. For one irrational second, David wondered if Rick had called the police, if someone had decided to finish the job. The knock came a third time. Daddy Lily's voice was small, groggy. "It's okay, David," said automatically, even though he had no idea if it was. "Stay there." He opened the door halfway. The woman standing on the porch was not the same woman from the bus stop. Or rather, she was, but everything else had been stripped away and replaced. Her coat was tailored, her posture straight, her eyes calm in a way that did not ask permission. She stood flanked by 2 men who looked like they had never doubted a room belonged to them. "Mr. Miller," she said, "may we come in?" Her voice was controlled, neutral, not apologetic, not threatening. The kind of voice used by people who expected doors to open. David's hand tightened on the doorframe. "Who are you?" She held his gaze. "My name is Eleanor Brooks. We met last night." He stared at her. The memory snapped into place. The coins, the shaking hands, the thin coat. His stomach dropped. "I need to speak with you," Eleanor continued. "Privately, if possible." Behind him, Lily shifted. David glanced back, then stepped outside and closed the door carefully behind him. "This isn't a good time," he said quietly. "I understand," Eleanor replied. "I won't take much." One of the men beside her leaned in slightly. "Sir, we're not here to cause trouble." David laughed, once sharp and humorless. "You parked 5 SUVs on my street." Eleanor raised a hand. The man stepped back immediately. "That was my mistake," she said. "I forget sometimes how that looks." David studied her face, searching for something. Guilt, embarrassment. He found neither. "What do you want?" he asked. Eleanor exhaled slowly. "I want to thank you, and I want to ask you some questions." "I didn't do it for thanks." "I know," she said. "That's why I'm here." A screen door creaked across the street. Mrs. Calder's curtains shifted. The town was waking up. David shook his head. "You should leave." Eleanor nodded once. "I will." After you listen." She gestured to the end of the porch. David hesitated, then leaned against the railing. He did not invite her in. He did not need to. Power did not require walls. "Last night, Eleanor said I was forced out of my own vehicle by someone I trusted. I was left without identification, without money, without a phone. I walked 3 miles before I found that bus stop." David's jaw tightened. "That's not my problem." "No," she agreed. "It wasn't. And yet you made it yours." She paused, letting the words settle. "I am not asking you for anything today," Eleanor continued. "I am not offering you a job. I am not here to fix your life." That almost made him angry. "Then why are you here?" he asked. "Because men like you are rare," she said, "and dangerous in the best possible way." David scoffed. "You don't know me." "I know you were fired yesterday," Eleanor said calmly. The world seemed to tilt. David straightened. "Who told you that I did not come here unprepared?" she replied. "I know about the conveyor incident. I know the safety logs were altered. I know you filed 3 complaints in the last 5 years, and each one cost someone above you money." His heart pounded. "That's confidential." "Not to me." One of the SUVs behind her clicked softly. A door unlocked. Somewhere down the street, a dog barked. "You should leave," David said again, his voice lower now. "Before this turns into something else." Eleanor studied him for a long moment. "Do you know why I asked for the bus fare?" He did not answer. "I could have called someone," she continued. "I could have walked another mile. I chose not to, because I wanted to see who noticed." "That's sick," David said. Maybe she admitted. "But it told me something important." He shook his head. "You tested me." "I observed you," she corrected. "There's a difference." The front door opened behind him. Lily stepped onto the porch in her socks blanket, dragging behind her. David turned instantly. "I told you to stay inside." She looked past him at the cars at Eleanor, her eyes wide. "Are we in trouble?" Eleanor crouched without being asked, lowering herself to Lily's eye level. "No, sweetheart, you're not in trouble." David bristled. "Don't." Eleanor stood back up immediately. "I apologize." Lily tugged David's sleeve. "Who is she?" David swallowed. "Someone I helped." Lily looked at Eleanor, then at the SUVs. "That's a lot of cars for helping." A few of the men nearby looked away. Eleanor smiled faintly. "You're very observant." Lily nodded, serious. "Daddy says people should say thank you." Eleanor reached into her coat and pulled out a folded envelope. She held it out not toward Lily, but toward David. "I am saying thank you," she said. He did not take it. "I don't want your money." "It's not money," Eleanor replied. Silence stretched. Finally, David took the envelope. Inside was a card. No logo, no flourish. Just a name. Eleanor Brooks, and a phone number written by hand. "Call me," she said. "Not today. Not tomorrow. When you decide whether you still believe integrity matters in a system designed to punish it. And if I don't call," Eleanor nodded once, "then this ends here." She turned, signaling the others. Doors opened. Engines shifted pitch. Before stepping away, she looked back at him. "Last night you walked home knowing your daughter might wake up hungry. You still gave me everything you had." Men who do that don't stay invisible forever. The SUVs pulled away one by one, leaving the street quiet again. Too quiet. David stood there long after they were gone, the envelope heavy in his hand. Lily leaned against him, her head fitting perfectly under his arm, like it always had. "Daddy," she said softly. "Are we okay?" He looked down at her, at the house at the street that no longer felt safe or small. "I don't know yet," he said. "But I think we're being watched." She frowned. "By who?" David stared at the empty road, Eleanor's words echoing in his head. "By the kind of people who don't knock unless they already know the answer." David did not call the number that day, or the day after. He folded the card once, then twice, and tucked it into the back of the junk drawer, beneath old manuals and a broken flashlight, as if hiding it there might stop the world from noticing him. The town noticed anyway. By noon, Maple Street was buzzing in the quiet sideways way small towns do when something unusual happens. Mrs. Calder brought over a casserole she had no reason to make. 2 men from the old shift lingered across the street, pretending to fix a tire that did not need fixing. Someone posted a photo of the SUVs online, with the caption asking who the big shots were looking for in Millstone. David kept his head down. He took Lily to school on foot, her hand small and warm, in his feeling eyes on his back the whole way. At the corner, she stopped and looked up at him. "Are we famous now?" she asked. He forced a smile. "No, kiddo. Just interesting for a minute." She considered that. "I don't like interesting." Neither did he. At home, the silence pressed in. David paced the living room, stopped paced again. His phone buzzed once with a message from Rick. Just one line. "Heard something strange this morning. You okay?" David did not reply. He pulled the termination letter from the drawer and laid it on the table. Then the safety reports, copies he had made over the years, dates, signatures, warnings that had gone unanswered. He spread them out like a quiet accusation. By mid-afternoon, the pain in his knees had settled into a dull throb. He swallowed 2 aspirin with tap water and sat back down. That was when the knock came again, softer this time. David opened the door to find a man in his early 40s wearing a windbreaker and an expression that tried to look casual, but failed. "David Miller?" the man asked. "Yes. My name's Tom Alvarez, State Labor Board." David felt his pulse spike. "About what?" Alvarez glanced at the house, then back at David. "May I come in?" David hesitated, then stepped aside. Alvarez did not sit. He stood near the window, hands clasped, eyes scanning the room like he was mapping exits. "We received a complaint regarding your termination." David let out a short laugh. That was fast. Alvarez gave a thin smile. "It wasn't anonymous." "Of course it wasn't." "Did you falsify safety logs?" "No." "Did you sign off on the conveyor restart?" "No." "Did your supervisor?" David nodded. "Yes." Alvarez scribbled something. "Would you be willing to give a statement?" David looked at the papers on the table. He thought of Rick's eyes. of the guard at the door, of how quickly a life could be rewritten with a pen. "Why now?" he asked. Alvarez hesitated. "Just for a beat. Sometimes things rise to the top when the right pressure is applied." David did not ask who applied it. After Alvarez left, David sat alone again. The light shifted across the floor. The refrigerator hummed. His phone buzzed once more. A different number this time. Unknown caller. He let it ring. Then again. On the third call, he answered. Mr. Miller Eleanor's voice said, "Calm, unrushed. I was told someone from the labor board stopped by." David closed his eyes. "You said you weren't fixing my life." "I said I wasn't offering you a job," she replied. "I did not say I would let a lie stand. You pulled strings." "I made a phone call," Eleanor said. "There's a difference." Silence stretched between them. "I don't like owing people," David said. "Good," she replied. "Neither do I." "Why me?" Eleanor did not answer right away. When she did, her voice was quieter. "Because the people who hurt me count on silence. And the people who hurt you do too. You already proved you don't stay quiet." David leaned against the counter. "What do you want?" "I want you to listen," she said. "Not as an employee. As a witness." "To what?" "To how systems protect themselves," Eleanor said, "and who they crush when they do." He thought of the kid at the factory, the near miss, the rewritten logs. "And what happens if I say no?" "Then you keep your integrity," Eleanor replied, "and I keep looking." That night, David picked Lily up from school. She was quieter than usual in the car. When they got home, she went straight to the table and pulled out a piece of paper. "I drew something," she said. It was the house again. But this time there were 5 dark shapes in the street, and beside the house a small figure holding the big one's hand. "That's you," she said. "You're standing in front of the cars." David swallowed. "How does that make you feel?" She shrugged. "Safe. You didn't move." Later, after Lily was asleep, David stood at the sink, washing the same plate twice. His reflection stared back at him, older than he felt, younger than he wanted to be. His phone buzzed again. A text this time. "Eleanor Brooks, tomorrow, 8 in the morning. Coffee. No entourage." David stared at the screen, then at the drawer where the card had been, then at the stack of papers on the table. He typed back slowly. "David Miller. 1 hour. That's it." The diner was halfway between Millstone and the city, one of those places that smelled like burnt coffee and old vinyl. Eleanor was already there, seated in a corner booth wearing jeans and a plain jacket. No guards, no SUVs, just a woman with tired eyes and a cup of coffee untouched. David slid into the booth across from her. "You look like you didn't sleep," she said. "Neither do you." She smiled faintly. "Fair." He did not order coffee. He folded his hands together to stop them from shaking. "Start talking." Eleanor nodded. 3 weeks ago, my company flagged an irregularity. Routing changes. Delays that didn't make sense. Someone was moving things quietly. "Stealing," David said. "Redirecting," she corrected. "Covering tracks." "And you think this connects to my firing?" I think Eleanor said carefully that the same firm that audits your factory also consults for my logistics network. Different departments, same blind spots. David leaned back. You're saying the problem is bigger than both of us. I'm saying it's designed that way. The waitress dropped off Eleanor's check. David noticed Eleanor paid in cash. Exact change. Why the act at the bus stop? He asked. Eleanor met his eyes. Because power reveals nothing. Power hides everything. I needed to know who you were without it. David stared at the table, at the scratches carved by decades of hands. And if I help you, Eleanor did not rush her answer. Then some people who think they are untouchable may find out they are not. And Lily Eleanor's expression softened. I don't involve children. David nodded slowly. He thought of the labor board, of Rick's text, of the kid who almost died. 1 hour, he said again. Eleanor smiled, not triumphantly. Respectfully. That's all I ask. Outside, trucks roared past on the highway. The world kept moving indifferent to two people sitting at a cracked vinyl booth, deciding whether to push back. David stood first. I'm not your employee. I know, Eleanor said. You're something more dangerous. He paused, then gave a single nod and walked out into the cold morning air, already aware that there was no going back to being invisible. The first thing David noticed was how quiet Eleanor's office was. Not peaceful, not calm. Quiet in the way rooms get when people are afraid to speak too loudly. The building sat on the edge of the city's old shipping district, glass and steel rising where warehouses once stood. David arrived 10 minutes early, dressed the same way he always dressed, worn boots, plain jacket. No attempt to impress. The receptionist looked at him twice before picking up the phone. She's expecting you, the woman said. Her voice measured. David followed a long hallway lined with framed aerial maps and logistics flowcharts. Ports, rail lines, arrows pointing everywhere. A system designed to move things efficiently without ever being seen. Eleanor was standing when he entered. No desk between them, no handshake. You came, she said. I said 1 hour. That was yesterday. David closed the door behind him. I'm still counting. She nodded, accepting the boundary. Good. Sit. He didn't. Show me, he said. Whatever you think I need to see. Eleanor studied him for a moment, then reached for a tablet on the conference table and slid it toward him. The screen filled with shipment logs, time stamps, route changes highlighted in red. These reroutes, she said, cost my company millions every quarter. Small enough not to trigger alarms, consistent enough to drain us slowly. David leaned in eyes scanning, his brow furrowed. This pattern, he said. It's not random. No, it's layered, he continued. Like someone wanted plausible deniability. Yes. He straightened. And this audit firm. You said they consult for my plant. They do? Eleanor replied. They also advise 3 of my competitors, and they sign off on safety compliance. David felt something cold settle in his stomach. You're saying they're laundering risk, not money. Risk. Eleanor's eyes sharpened. That's exactly what I'm saying. A knock interrupted them. A man stepped in without waiting for an answer. Late 40s, expensive suit worn like armor. "Eleanor," he said. "Board wants an update." She did not turn. "This is not the time, Marcus." Marcus glanced at David. A flicker of recognition crossed his face. "Is this him?" David met his gaze, did not look away. "Yes," Eleanor said. "This is David Miller." Marcus's jaw tightened. "The maintenance guy." "The one who refused to falsify reports," Eleanor corrected. Marcus exhaled sharply. "You're risking exposure." Eleanor finally turned. "I am managing it." With him, Marcus pressed. "He's a liability." David felt the word land. He had worn it before. "Leave us," Eleanor said. Marcus hesitated, then smiled thinly. "Just remember who answers to who." After he left the room, felt smaller. That, Eleanor said quietly, is part of the problem. David pushed the tablet back. "You don't trust your own board." "I trust incentives," she replied. "And incentives don't favor truth." He nodded slowly. "Then you're not asking me to investigate. You're asking me to validate what you already know. I'm asking you to see what I can't," Eleanor said. "You know how corners get cut. You know the language people use when they think no one is listening." David considered. "And what happens when this blows back on me?" Eleanor did not soften the answer. "It will." He expected that. "What about my daughter?" "She stays out of it," Eleanor said. "I give you my word." David let out a breath. "Your word is currency. Mine is all I have." "That's why I need it," she said. His phone buzzed. He glanced down. A message from Rick. "Company audit scheduled. People asking questions. You need to keep your head down." David did not reply. He stood. 1 hour. Eleanor nodded again. "I'll take it." Outside, the city moved faster than Millstone ever had. Horns, sirens, people who did not look at each other. David walked 2 blocks before his knees forced him to slow. He leaned against a brick wall, grounding himself. He had spent decades keeping machines running so other people could look good. Now the machine was turning toward him. That night, Lily sat at the kitchen table doing homework. David watched her from the doorway, the way she chewed her pencil when she was concentrating. "Daddy," she said without looking up. "Mrs. Calder says people are talking." He sat across from her. "About what?" "About the cars," she said. "And you." He nodded. "They'll stop." She frowned. "Why do grown-ups whisper instead of asking?" He smiled sadly. "Because whispering feels safer," she considered that. "It doesn't." No, he agreed. It doesn't. Later, after Lily was asleep, David spread the documents Eleanor had given him across the table. He traced routes with his finger. Ports he recognized. Firms he had seen on clipboards at the plant. A name jumped out at him. Harlan Risk Solutions. Rick's brother-in-law worked there. David closed his eyes. The shape of it formed in his mind. The accident, the audit, the firing. Not isolated, aligned. His phone rang. Unknown number. He answered. "You should walk away," a voice said. "Male, controlled. You're out of your depth." David gripped the counter. "Who is this?" "A friend," the voice replied. "Offering advice?" I don't take advice from people who hide. A pause. You think Eleanor can protect you? I think she knows the game, David said. And I know the rules. A low chuckle. Rules change. So do people, David said. Good night. He hung up, heart pounding. The next morning, David returned to Eleanor's office. This time the receptionist did not question him. This time the silence felt heavier. Eleanor was seated, phone pressed to her ear. She ended the call when she saw him. They're moving, she said. Faster than I expected. Same here, David replied. He laid out the connection. The names, the overlap. Eleanor listened, her face tightening with each word. That confirms it. Then you have a bigger problem, David said. Because if this goes public, it won't stop with your company. It will spread, she said. Regulators, lawsuits, lives. David nodded. And they'll try to make an example out of someone small. She met his eyes. They already did. A long silence followed. I need you to testify, Eleanor said finally. Not now. When the time comes. David thought of Lily, of the plant, of the kid who almost died. If I do this, he said, there's no halfway. I know. And you can't protect me forever. I know that. Too. David stood. Then we do it right. Slow, clean. No shortcuts. Eleanor rose with him. You sound like you're still running maintenance. He gave a thin smile. Someone has to keep the system from killing people. As he left, David felt the weight of what he had agreed to settle fully on his shoulders. Outside, the city sky was low and grey, pressing down. Back in Millstone, a black sedan rolled slowly past his house and did not stop. David watched it from the window, one hand resting on the back of Lily's chair as she colored. The machine had noticed him, and this time it was not going to pretend otherwise. The letter arrived onto Wednesday morning, slipped through the mail slot without ceremony. The envelope thin and official, the kind that made your shoulders tense before you even opened it. David recognized the return address immediately. Harlan Risk Solutions. He did not open it right away. He stood at the counter, the kettle screaming behind him. Lily at the table, tying and retying her sneakers. Her tongue caught between her teeth, the way she did when she was nervous. You're early, she said. Field trip, he replied. Museum day. She smiled, relief washing over her face. He poured the hot water, set the mug down untouched, and slid the envelope into his jacket pocket like it might bite. After he dropped Lily off, he drove the long way home, past the old plant, past the gate where a new sign now warned about restricted access and safety compliance, like the place had suddenly learned the language David had been speaking for years. At the kitchen table, he finally opened the envelope. Notice of intent to depose. They wanted him under oath, not as a witness, as a subject. David exhaled slowly. This was the counterpunch. He had expected it. Still his hands shook. His phone buzzed almost immediately. Eleanor. You got it. David. Yes. Eleanor. Do not respond. Forward it to me. He did. Then he stared at the wall, listening to the refrigerator hum, the same dull sound that had followed him through every major turning point of his adult life. By afternoon, The town had shifted again. A local news van parked outside the plant. A headline online asked questions no one had wanted to ask before. A safety violation, a whistleblower, a former employee. Rick called. 3 times. David did not answer. That evening, Eleanor called instead. "They're trying to control the narrative," she said. "They want to paint you as unstable." David laughed once. "They fired me for following procedure." "Yes," Eleanor replied. "And now they'll say, you did it for attention." He leaned back in his chair. "What do you need from me?" "Nothing tonight," she said. "But you should know this isn't just about liability anymore. It's about containment." "Meaning?" "They're scared," Eleanor said. "And scared institutions do reckless things." After the call, David walked the house, checking locks he had never thought about before. He stood in Lily's doorway, longer than usual, watching her sleep, her small hand curled around the stuffed dog she had owned since she was 3. He promised himself again that he would not let the world crush her for his choices. The next day, 2 men showed up at his door. Not in SUVs, not in suits. Plain jackets. Polite smiles. "Mr. Miller," one of them said. "We'd like to ask a few questions." David did not invite them in. "You should talk to my attorney." They exchanged a glance. "You have an attorney?" "Not yet," David said. "But I will." They left without pushing. That worried him more than if they had tried. At Eleanor's office, the atmosphere had shifted. Phones rang and stopped ringing when David walked past. Conversations cut short. People were watching now, measuring. Eleanor met him in a smaller room than before. No windows, no tablet. "They reached out to my board," she said. "Privately." David crossed his arms. "Let me guess. They offered reassurance." "They offered partnership," Eleanor replied. "Shared risk, shared silence." "And I declined." He studied her face. "That cost you?" "Yes." "Then why do it?" Eleanor held his gaze. "Because the moment I didn't, I became complicit." David nodded. He understood that line better than most. "They're going to escalate." Eleanor continued. "Not with force, with pressure." As if on cue, David's phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Your daughter deserves stability. Think carefully." David felt the air leave his lungs. Eleanor saw his expression change. "What is it?" He showed her the screen. Her jaw tightened. That was a mistake on their part. "They mentioned Lily," David said quietly. "They crossed a line," Eleanor replied. "And now they lose control of the timing." He looked at her sharply. "What does that mean?" "It means," Eleanor said, voice steady, "that I stop protecting the process and start protecting the people." Outside, rain streaked down the glass. The city looked washed out, temporary. That night, David did not sleep. He sat at the kitchen table with the deposition notice, the text message, and the safety logs spread out like pieces of a map. He thought about all the times he had told younger workers to speak up. All the times he had believed doing the right thing would eventually be enough. At 3 a.m, he typed an email. To State Labor Board, subject formal statement and supporting documentation. He attached everything. When he hit send, his hands stopped shaking. The fallout was immediate. By the weekend, the story was no longer local. A regional outlet ran with it, then a national one. Phrases like systemic negligence and coordinated suppression started appearing in print. Harlan Risk Solutions issued a statement denying everything. Eleanor released her own. David watched the coverage from his living room, Lily beside him coloring quietly. "Why is your name on the TV?" she asked. He swallowed. "Because I told the truth." She nodded slowly. "Truth makes people loud." "Yes," he said. "It does." On Monday, Eleanor called him into her office. Not the quiet one. The big one. The board was there. All of them. David stood at the end of the table, aware of how out of place he looked. Worn jacket, calloused hands. A man built for work that left marks. "We need to discuss exposure," one of them said. "No," Eleanor replied. "We need to discuss accountability." Another board member leaned forward. "This is getting bigger than expected." Eleanor folded her hands. "It was always this big. You just didn't want to see it." They turned to David. "What exactly are you alleging?" a woman asked. David met her eyes. That safety was treated like a line item. That risk was outsourced. That when something went wrong, you sacrificed people instead of fixing systems. Silence. "You're accusing powerful firms," the woman said. David nodded. "I know. And you understand the consequences." He thought of Lily's drawing, of the cars, of the text message. "Yes," he said. "I do." Eleanor stood. "Then we move forward." The meeting ended without consensus. That told David everything he needed to know. As he left the building, his phone rang. A number he did not recognize. He answered. "You don't know when to stop." A familiar voice said, "Rick." David closed his eyes. "You should have done the right thing." Rick laughed bitterly. "You think this ends well for you?" "I think it ends honestly," David replied. "That's not how the world works." "Maybe not," David said. "But it's how I do." He hung up and kept walking. That evening, as the sun dipped low, David and Lily sat on the porch steps eating grilled cheese. The street was quiet again. Too quiet. A car slowed at the corner, then drove on. Daddy Lily said, "Are you scared?" He considered the question. "Yes." She nodded. "Me too." He put his arm around her. "But we're not wrong." She leaned into him. "That's good." David watched the light fade, aware that the machine was still moving, still adjusting, still deciding how to deal with him. What he did not know yet was that the next move would not be subtle, and it would not come from where he expected. The fire alarm at Lily's school went off at 10:17 in the morning, and David knew something was wrong before his phone even rang. He was standing in Eleanor's office, hands braced on the back of a chair, listening to two attorneys argue about jurisdiction when the sound cut through the glass walls. High, repetitive, not from the building, from his pocket. Unknown number. He answered without thinking. "Mr. Miller." A woman said, breathless but controlled. "This is Principal Hayes from Lincoln Elementary. Your daughter is safe, but there's been an incident." David's heart slammed hard enough to make him dizzy. What kind of incident? A man attempted to remove her from campus, Hayes said. He claimed to be a family friend. Security intervened. Police are here now. David's vision tunneled. The room tilted. I'm on my way, he said, already moving. Eleanor was beside him instantly. What happened? Someone tried to take Lily, David said. His voice sounded wrong. Too calm. I'm going. Eleanor grabbed her coat. I'm coming with you. No, David snapped. He stopped himself, breathed. No. I'll handle this. She met his eyes. There was no argument in hers, only calculation. You won't be alone. The drive to the school blurred, red lights ignored, horns unanswered. David's hands were white on the steering wheel, every muscle locked tight. Images flashed uninvited. Lily's small hand, the text message. Think carefully. Police cruisers lined the curb when he arrived. Parents clustered in tight knots, voices sharp, fearful. He spotted Lily immediately sitting on the front steps with a blanket around her shoulders. Mrs. Calder crouched beside her like a shield. David was out of the car, before it stopped moving. Daddy Lily cried when she saw him. She ran into his arms, burying her face in his jacket. He held her so tightly she squeaked. I've got you, he whispered. I've got you. A uniformed officer cleared his throat. Mr. Miller. David turned slowly. Yes. We need to ask you a few questions, the officer said. About a man who claimed to know your family. What did he look like? David asked. The officer hesitated. Middle-aged, well-dressed, said he worked with you. Gave a name. David's stomach dropped. What name? The officer checked his notes. He said his name was Victor Hale, Eleanor's board member, the one who had never spoken unless it was to suggest delay. David felt something cold and precise lock into place. He didn't know Lily's teacher, the officer continued. Didn't know her schedule. That's what raised the alarm. Did he touch her? David asked. No, the officer said quickly. He never got close. David nodded once. That was all he allowed himself. At home, Lily sat on the couch, wrapped in a blanket, staring at nothing. David knelt in front of her. Did he say anything to you? He asked gently. She shook her head. He smiled. I didn't like it. That's okay, David said. You did the right thing. She leaned forward, resting her forehead against his chest. Are we moving? He closed his eyes. Not today. After she fell asleep, David stood alone in the kitchen, shaking for the first time since this had begun. Fear. Real fear. Not for himself. For the thing he loved most in the world. His phone buzzed. Eleanor. I know who it was. David. I do too. Eleanor. That means they're out of options. David stared at the wall. They came after my kid, Eleanor. Which means they think you're close. David laughed, once hollow. I am. An hour later, Eleanor arrived at his house. No SUVs. Just her. She did not knock. He opened the door before she could. They crossed the line, David said. Yes, Eleanor replied. And now we stop playing defense. He looked at her. really looked. The calm, the stillness, the way the fear stopped at the edges of her and went no further. "You knew this could happen," he said. "I knew it might," she answered. "I did not think they would be that careless." "What do you want from me?" "I want you to trust me," Eleanor said. "Completely. For the next 48 hours. David hesitated, then nodded. "Tell me what you're not saying." Eleanor inhaled. "Victor Hale is not just a board member. He is a conduit. He sits on 3 advisory committees, 2 regulatory boards, and 1 private equity oversight council. He doesn't move money. He moves outcomes." David absorbed that. "And you let him near Lily?" "No," Eleanor said sharply. "I did not think he would go that far." Silence settled between them. "I'm not the only CEO involved in this," Eleanor said finally. David's eyes narrowed. "I know. But I am the only one who owns the evidence," she continued, "and the only one who has not been compromised." He studied her face. "You're not just reacting. You're controlling the board." Eleanor did not deny it. "I built this company by understanding systems, and systems only collapse when you pull the right load-bearing piece." David felt the weight of the moment press down. "Which is me. Which is truth," Eleanor corrected, "and timing." That night, David moved Lily to Eleanor's secure residence without telling her why. He said it was a sleepover. Eleanor's house was not large, but it was fortified in ways that did not announce themselves. Lily fell asleep on a couch that smelled like clean linen and safety. David sat across from Eleanor, in the kitchen, a stack of documents between them. "You ready?" Eleanor asked. He nodded. "What's the plan?" "Tomorrow morning," Eleanor said, "I release a controlled disclosure, not about my company, about the network, and me." "And you?" she agreed. "But not as a victim." David frowned. "Then as what?" "As the point of failure," Eleanor said. "The man who refused to disappear." He exhaled slowly. "They'll come after me." "They already did," Eleanor replied. "Now they do it in daylight." David thought of the boardroom, of Victor's smile, of Lily's fear. Do it. The next morning, the story broke everywhere at once. An op-ed, a whistleblower affidavit, a web of consulting firms and regulators named and mapped, and at the center of it, David Miller. Maintenance supervisor, union representative, father. Victor Hale resigned within hours. By noon, federal investigators announced a preliminary review. By 3 in the afternoon, Eleanor's board called an emergency session. David watched the coverage from Eleanor's living room, Lily drawing quietly beside him. His phone buzzed non-stop. Unknown numbers, messages, threats disguised as concern. One text stood out. "You have no idea who you just challenged." David typed back with steady hands. "I know exactly who." That evening, Eleanor stood beside him at the window. "They're going to try one last thing," she said. "What?" "They'll try to flip the story," Eleanor replied. "Make you look like a pawn." David nodded. "Then it's time to stop hiding you." She looked at him. "You're ready?" "I've been ready my whole life," David said. "I just didn't know it." Eleanor's phone rang. She answered, listened, then smiled slightly. "It's time," she said. "For what?" "For them to learn." Eleanor replied, her voice steady and cold, that the woman they underestimated is the one who decides what breaks next. Outside, the city lights flickered on one by one, unaware that a reckoning had already begun. And for the first time since the factory office, David did not feel small. The hearing was scheduled for 9 in the morning, and by 8:30 the sidewalk outside the federal building was already lined with cameras. David watched from the back seat of Eleanor's car as reporters rehearsed questions they had already decided the answers to. He adjusted the collar of his jacket, the same one he had worn to work for years, the fabric softened by use. His knees bounced once, then stilled. Control mattered. "You don't have to do this," Eleanor said quietly from beside him. David did not look at her. "Yes," he said. "I do." The car stopped. The driver opened the door. Sound rushed in. Shouting. Flashing lights. Names being called like accusations. "Mr. Miller, were you paid to testify? Is this a coordinated attack on private industry? Are you being used?" David stepped out slowly. He did not rush. He did not smile. He did not wave. He walked like a man who had already survived worse rooms than this. Inside, the air was colder. Marble floors, high ceilings, the kind of place built to remind people how small they were supposed to feel. Eleanor's attorneys peeled off at the security checkpoint. From here on, this was David's ground. The committee room was half full when he entered. Officials in dark suits, staffers whispering. Victor Hale sat at the far end of the table, no longer confident, his jaw clenched tight. He did not look at David, not once. David took his seat, hands folded, eyes forward. The chairwoman cleared her throat. "This hearing will come to order." David listened as procedures were read, as oaths were administered, as language wrapped itself around reality in ways meant to dull it. He answered questions plainly: where he worked, what his role had been, what he had witnessed. "Did you alter safety documentation?" one senator asked. "No," David said. "Did you benefit financially from reporting these concerns?" "No." "Then why continue?" David looked up. He did not hesitate. "Because a 17-year-old kid almost died. And because silence would have made me responsible the next time." A murmur rippled through the room. Another senator leaned forward. "Mr. Miller, are you aware that your statements could destabilize multiple industries?" David nodded. "Yes. And you're comfortable with that?" David thought of Lily's face at the school steps. "I'm comfortable with the truth." Victor shifted. Sweat darkened the collar of his shirt. When it was Victor's turn, his voice shook only slightly. He denied everything. Called it coincidence. Misinterpretation. Overreach. Then Eleanor was called. She walked in alone. No entourage, no notes. She sat straight, calm, and deadly focused. "Ms. Brooks, the chairwoman, said, 'Are you aware of the implications of your disclosures?' Eleanor met her gaze. 'I am aware of the consequences of hiding them.' She laid out the network with surgical precision. Names, dates, cross-referenced decisions, How risk was shifted, buried, disguised. How the same consulting firms appeared wherever accountability disappeared. The room changed, not dramatically, subtly. Shoulders tightened. Pens stopped moving. Victor interrupted. "This is speculation." Eleanor turned to him. "Then explain the attempt to remove a child from school." The room went silent. Victor's face drained of color. "I have no idea what you're referring to." Eleanor did not raise her voice. "Federal agents do." David felt it then. The shift, the machine grinding gears, catching. The hearing recessed for lunch, but no one left. Phones buzzed. Staffers whispered urgently. Somewhere down the hall, raised voices echoed. Eleanor leaned toward David. "They're breaking." David nodded. "Good." Outside, news alerts spread faster than facts ever had. A bored resignation. A sealed indictment. An unnamed official placed on leave, pending investigation. By mid-afternoon, Victor Hale was escorted from the building. Not in handcuffs. Not yet. But his power was gone, and everyone could see it. David testified again. This time about the attempted abduction, about the texts, about the pressure. "Were you afraid?" a senator asked. David considered. "Yes." "Then why proceed?" David's voice was steady. "Because fear doesn't excuse inaction. It explains it. There's a difference." When it was over, David walked out into the late afternoon sun, feeling hollowed out and lighter all at once. Eleanor joined him on the steps. "You did well," she said. "I told the truth," he replied. "That's rarer." They stood side by side as the crowd pressed forward. A reporter shouted a question. "Mr. Miller, do you consider yourself a hero?" David turned slowly. He thought of the factory floor, the bus stop, Lily's drawings. "No," he said. "I consider myself employed by my conscience." That night, David did not go home. He stayed at Eleanor's house with Lily, the three of them eating takeout at the kitchen island. Lily chatted about school, about a girl who had lent her crayons, about wanting a dog someday. Eleanor listened, smiling softly. When Lily finally fell asleep, Eleanor poured 2 cups of tea and handed one to David. "You know this doesn't end here," she said. "I know. You'll be offered things," Eleanor continued. "Positions, platforms. People will want to use you." David stared into the cup. "I'm not for sale." "I know," Eleanor said. "That's why they'll try harder." He looked up at her. "What about you?" Eleanor exhaled. "I'll survive. I always do." David studied her face. For the first time, he saw exhaustion beneath the steel. "You don't have to do this alone." She met his eyes. A flicker of something unguarded crossed her expression. "Neither do you." The next morning, the plant announced a shutdown pending investigation. Workers gathered outside the gates, angry and confused. David drove past, slowly recognizing faces, men he had stood beside for decades. He rolled down the window. "Tell the truth," he called out. "It's coming anyway." Some stared. Some nodded. One man raised a fist. By noon, the Labor Board reinstated David's termination as wrongful. Back pay authorized. Benefits restored. David read the email twice, then closed his laptop. "That's it," Eleanor said. "For that chapter," David replied. His phone buzzed again. This time, a message from an unfamiliar number. "You think you won?" David typed back. "No. I think I stopped losing." He put the phone down and went to sit with Lily on the floor, helping her build a puzzle piece by piece. Outside, the world reeled and adjusted, trying to understand what had just happened. Inside, David felt something he had not felt in years. Grounded. Whatever came next, he would face it, standing. The first offer arrived before David had finished his morning coffee. It came by email, subject line, polished and polite, the kind that pretended it had not been waiting its turn. A senior compliance role, national scope. 6 figures spelled out in careful language, benefits, highlighted like mercy. David read it once, then closed the laptop without replying. By noon, there were 3 more. He sat at Eleanor's kitchen table while Lily worked on her homework, the sound of her pencil scratching steady and grounding. Outside, a delivery truck idled too long before pulling away. David watched it through the window until it disappeared. "You're famous," Lily said without looking up. "I'm visible," David replied. "There's a difference." She thought about that. "I don't want you on TV anymore." He smiled faintly. "Me neither." The doorbell rang just after lunch. Eleanor glanced at the security monitor, then nodded toward the door. "It's them." David stood. His knees ached, but the ache felt familiar now, like a reminder he was still in his body. He opened the door to find 2 men and a woman standing on the porch, all wearing the same carefully neutral expressions. "Mr. Miller," the woman said. "We're from the department." David did not ask which one. "You can come in." They sat at the dining table. No recording devices visible. No paperwork at first. The man with grey at his temples spoke. "We're exploring the possibility of a formal advisory role," he said. "You'd help us identify systemic blind spots." David folded his hands. "With what authority?" "Influence," the woman replied. "Access and constraints," David added. The man smiled thinly. "Every role has boundaries." David nodded. "Then I'm not your guy." Silence followed. Not shock. Assessment. "You're walking away from leverage," the woman said. David glanced toward the living room where Lily sat coloring. "I'm walking toward limits I can live with." They left without argument. Professionals respected clarity. That evening, Eleanor found him on the back steps, the air cool, the sky heavy with clouds. "You're turning them all down," she said. "Yes." "Why?" David stared into the yard. "Because I've seen what happens when people confuse access with power." Eleanor sat beside him. "You could change things." "I already did," David replied. "Now I want to protect what matters." She studied him for a long moment. "They won't stop." "I know. They'll try another angle." "I know that too." The next angle came disguised as help. A foundation reached out, offering a scholarship fund in Lily's name. A non-profit suggested a speaking tour. A media producer pitched a limited series. David declined them all. The pressure shifted. Online comments turned sharper. Anonymous posts questioned his motives. A blog implied Eleanor had orchestrated everything to eliminate competitors. David read none of it. Eleanor read all of it. "They're trying to separate us," she said one night, setting her phone down. Turn you into a symbol and me into a villain. David leaned back. Then stop standing next to me. Eleanor's eyes snapped to his. No, I don't want Lily paying for this, he said quietly. She already did, Eleanor replied. That's why we don't retreat. David looked away. He hated that she was right. A week later, a man approached him at the grocery store, early 60s, familiar face, one of the auditors who used to walk the plant floor with a clipboard and a smile that never reached his eyes. You made things difficult, the man said softly between the cereal aisle and the frozen foods. David met his gaze. You made them dangerous. The man's smile faded. Careful. I am David, replied. That's the problem. That night, David woke to the sound of Eleanor's phone vibrating. She answered it in the dark, listening without speaking. When she hung up, she did not lie back down. What is it? David asked. They're pushing a settlement, she said. Quiet, comprehensive, and they want you to publicly step back, Eleanor continued. Say you were overwhelmed, misled. David sat up. They want me to lie. They want closure, Eleanor corrected. He swung his legs over the bed. Then they'll wait. The next morning, David drove Lily to school himself. He walked her to the door, waited until she disappeared inside. Mr. Miller. A voice called. He turned to see Principal Hayes standing on the steps. I wanted you to know, she said, we've updated our security protocols because of you. David nodded. Thank you. No, Hayes replied. Thank you. On the drive home, David felt something loosen in his chest. Not relief, resolve. Back at Eleanor's house, a package waited by the door. No return address. Inside was a single photograph. The bus stop. Grainy. Taken from across the street. Him. Eleanor. The exchange frozen in time. On the back, a message written in block letters. We remember everything. David stared at it for a long moment, then tore it in half and dropped it in the trash. Eleanor watched him. They're reminding you they were there first. They're reminding me I was never invisible, David said. That afternoon, Eleanor convened a small meeting. No board members, no attorneys, just 2 senior operations leads, and David. We're restructuring, Eleanor said. Not to grow, to harden. David listened as they discussed redundancies, transparency layers, external oversight. Systems built to resist corruption instead of enabling it. You're building something slower, David said. Yes, Eleanor replied, and harder to break. One of the leads frowned. It will cost us. Eleanor nodded. Integrity always does. After the meeting, Eleanor walked David to the door. You could stay, she said. Formally. Not as a symbol, as infrastructure. David considered it. With Lily. Of course, he nodded slowly. On my terms. Eleanor smiled just a little. I wouldn't expect anything else. That night, David and Lily sat on the couch watching an old movie. Halfway through, Lily leaned against him. Daddy, she said. Are the bad people gone? He kissed the top of her head. Some are quieter. She yawned. That's okay. You're loud enough. He laughed softly. I don't feel loud. You are, she insisted. You don't move. David looked at the dark screen reflecting the two of them. He understood then what had changed. He was no longer reacting. He was choosing. Outside, another car drove past without stopping. Somewhere deals were being made, narratives rewritten, power rearranged. Inside, David stayed where he was, Lily warm against his side, Eleanor in the next room. Drafting policies that would never make headlines, but would save lives. The machine was still turning, but now it knew it was being watched. The call came just after dawn, the kind of hour when truth slipped through defenses because no one was fully awake yet. David was already up, standing at the sink, rinsing a mug he had not finished. Eleanor's house was quiet, except for the low hum of the security system and the distant sound of Lily breathing in the guest room. The phone vibrated once, then again, then stopped. David wiped his hands on a towel and answered. Mr. Miller, a man said. Older, controlled, tired. This is Assistant U.S. Attorney Raymond Cole. David straightened. Yes. We're requesting your presence today, Cole continued. Voluntary. Not a summons. For what purpose? David asked. To close a gap, Cole replied. One we can't close without you. David looked down the hallway toward Lily's room. I'll need to arrange childcare. That won't be a problem, Cole said. Ms. Brooks is already aware. David exhaled slowly. I'll be there. The federal building felt different this time. Less spectacle, fewer cameras, no shouting. The security guards nodded him through like he belonged. That unsettled him more than hostility ever had. In a conference room, 2 floors underground, David sat across from 3 people. Cole, a woman from the Inspector General's office, and a man David did not recognize, thin, pale hands folded too neatly. This is Thomas Rourke, Cole said, former senior partner at Harlan Risk Solutions. David's stomach tightened. Former. Rourke did not look up. Effective yesterday. Cole leaned forward. Mr. Rourke has agreed to cooperate. David said nothing. He's provided documentation, the Inspector General said. Emails, memos, agreements that establish a pattern of coordinated regulatory influence. Rourke swallowed. We didn't think it would spread this far. David's eyes locked onto him. You never do. Rourke flinched. It was always about containment, limiting exposure, and the kid at the factory, David said. Was that containment too? Rourke closed his eyes. He survived. David leaned back, jaw tight. You don't get credit for that. Cole cleared his throat. Miller, what we need from you is testimony that connects the operational decisions to the consulting directives. Without that, it's circumstantial. David nodded slowly. You want me to draw the line? Yes, Cole said. Publicly. And what happens after? David asked. Cole did not sugarcoat it. There will be retaliation, civil suits, media pressure. You'll be framed as reckless. David thought of the photo in the trash. We remember everything. I already am, he said. The Inspector General slid a document across the table. This outlines protections, relocation options, security. David barely glanced at it. My daughter stays where she is. We can't guarantee David cut her off. Then we don't proceed. Silence settled. Cole studied David carefully. You understand the leverage you're holding? David met his gaze. I understand the responsibility. The meeting ended without ceremony. No handshake, no congratulations. Just the quiet understanding that a line had been crossed, and there was no erasing it. Outside, Eleanor waited by the car. She read David's face before he spoke. They're ready, she said. Yes, David replied. And they're scared. She nodded. Good. On the drive back, David watched the city slide past. Construction cranes, closed storefronts, people walking fast, heads down. The system moved on whether you resisted or not. At Eleanor's house, Lily was at the table eating cereal, Mrs. Calder seated beside her with a crossword. Hey, Lily said when she saw him. You were gone fast. Just work stuff, David replied. Mrs. Calder stood. She's been good. I know, David said. Thank you. After Lily went to school, Eleanor and David sat in the kitchen. This will end some careers, Eleanor said. Not all, but enough. And you? David asked. Eleanor smiled thinly. I'll be fine. You always say that. And I always am, she replied. Then softer. This time, because you didn't back down. The next 48 hours blurred together. Legal prep, phone calls, documents reviewed again and again. David slept little. When he did, he dreamed of the factory floor, the sound of the conveyor restarting the scream that never came. On the morning of the testimony, the city felt suspended. Grey sky, heavy air. David wore the same jacket again. Not out of symbolism, out of habit. The hearing room was full but quiet. No shouting this time. Just pens, paper, and eyes waiting. David took the oath. He did not rush his answers. He explained processes. Decision trees. How pressure moved downward until someone broke. How safety became negotiable when profit was framed as survival. He named names. Rourke testified after him. Then others. One by one, the structure revealed itself. Not a conspiracy. A culture. By the time it ended, indictments were already being drafted. David walked out into the afternoon light, feeling emptied and strangely calm. Eleanor joined him at the top of the steps. It's done, she said. The first part, David replied. Phones buzzed. News alerts exploded. Markets reacted. Statements were released and retracted. They did not stay to watch. That evening, David cooked dinner. Simple. Pasta. Lily helped stir her movements careful. Daddy, she said, are people mad at you? Some, he said. Why? Because I didn't move. She nodded. Good. After dinner, David tucked her in. She reached out and held his hand. Will it be loud tomorrow? She asked. Probably. She squeezed his fingers. I don't like loud, I know, David said. But it passes. When she fell asleep, David stood in the doorway longer than usual. Downstairs, Eleanor waited, phone in hand. They're already trying to spin it, she said. Character attacks, motive questions. David shrugged. Let them. They'll come after me next. They already have, David replied. Eleanor studied him. You're not afraid anymore. David thought about it. I'm afraid. I just know where to put it. Outside, the night settled over the city. Somewhere powerful, people were calculating losses, deciding who to sacrifice next. Inside, David sat at the table with Eleanor. Two people who had refused to disappear, understanding that the real cost was not what they had lost, but what they would never get back. And neither of them regretted it. The city woke up slower the morning after the indictments, like it needed time to decide what kind of day it was allowed to be. David stood at the front window of Eleanor's house, coffee cooling in his hands, watching sunlight creep across the street in thin, careful lines. No cameras, no cars idling too long, just a delivery truck stopping where it always stopped, a jogger moving past with earbuds in life, continuing the way it always did, when history had already moved on. Behind him, Lily padded into the kitchen in her socks. Is it quiet? She asked. For now, David said. She nodded, satisfied, and climbed onto a chair. Eleanor set a bowl of cereal in front of her, without ceremony. No one spoke about the night before. No one needed to. The television stayed off. By mid-morning, the calls began again. Not threats this time. Not offers. Notifications. Court dates. Statements. Requests for comment that went unanswered. David ignored them all. At 10:30, a black sedan pulled up to the curb. It did not linger. A man stepped out alone, carrying a thin folder. He rang the bell once. David opened the door. Mr. Miller, the man said. I'm from the Department of Labor. David nodded. I figured. The man handed him the folder. Formal reinstatement, full back pay. Benefits retroactive, official apology. David glanced inside, then closed it. Thank you. There's also an offer, the man added. Consultative. Temporary. You'd help rewrite compliance frameworks. David met his eyes. I'm not interested. The man blinked. You haven't heard the terms. I don't need to, David said. Someone else can do that work. The man hesitated. They won't. They will, David replied. They just won't look like me. The man nodded slowly as if filing that away, then left without argument. Eleanor watched from the kitchen doorway. You're sure, she said. Yes. You're leaving leverage on the table. David set the folder down. I'm setting boundaries. She smiled faintly. That's new for you. No, David said. It just looks that way. That afternoon, David drove Lily home. Back to their house on Maple Street. The same gravel lot. The same crooked step. Mrs. Calder waved from her porch relief written plainly on her face. You staying? She asked. Yes, David said. Good, she replied. This street needs stubborn men. Inside the house smelled the same. Old wood. Soap. Familiar quiet. David walked through the rooms, slowly grounding himself in what had always mattered. Lily ran ahead, checking her drawings on the fridge, like they might have shifted while she was gone. They're still here, she announced. Good, David said. They belong. That night, Eleanor came over without guards, without pretense. They sat at the small kitchen table, knees almost touching the space between them, filled with things they did not rush to name. "You don't owe me anything," Eleanor said. "I know," David replied. "You could walk away from all of this." "I am," he said. "Just not from you." She studied him, searching for calculation, and finding none. "You understand what comes with that?" David nodded. "I do." Silence settled comfortably. Not avoidance, choice. Over the next weeks, the world recalibrated. Charges were filed, settlements announced, names disappeared from letterheads, others rose quietly in their place. The news cycle moved on, hungry for something newer. David returned to work. Not at the plant. At a vocational school 10 miles away, teaching safety systems to men and women who had learned the hard way that procedures were written in blood. He wore the same jacket. He spoke plainly. He told them the truth. "Machines don't fail," he said one afternoon. "People decide what failure is acceptable." They listened. Lily adjusted too. School returned to routine. Homework. Soccer practice. Drawings that now showed 3 figures, standing side by side, without explanation. Eleanor stayed present, but unannounced. Dinners. Homework help. Quiet conversations on the porch when Lily was asleep. No promises spoken aloud. None needed. One evening as the sun dipped low, David and Eleanor sat on the steps watching fireflies blink into existence like small, stubborn stars. "You changed things," Eleanor said. David shook his head. "Things were already changing. You accelerated it." Maybe he said. Or maybe I just refused to slow down. She smiled. That's still power. David looked out at the street. It's responsibility. Months later, the factory gates rusted shut for good. A new sign went up announcing redevelopment. Some men cursed it. Others shrugged. David watched from his truck and felt neither satisfaction nor regret. Endings did not always come with clarity. They came with consequences. One morning, Lily asked him a question she had been holding for a long time. "Daddy," she said, tying her shoes carefully, "are you important?" David knelt in front of her. "Everyone is." She frowned. "I mean to the world." David considered. "I'm important to you." She smiled. "That's enough." He hugged her, breathing her in, anchoring himself. The phone still rang sometimes. Invitations, panels, stories that wanted to frame him as something simpler than he was. David declined them all. He had learned something essential. Power did not come from being seen. It came from refusing to disappear. On a quiet Sunday afternoon, David stood at the bus stop on 4th Street. The bench was still cracked. The light still flickered. He sat there for a moment, hands folded, remembering a night when he had nothing left, and gave it away anyway. Eleanor stood beside him now, hands in her pockets. "You ever regret it?" she asked. "No," David said, even knowing everything that followed, especially knowing he replied. A bus roared past without stopping. The moment passed. They walked home together. If this story meant something to you, take a second to like and subscribe and leave a comment with these 3 words: stand your ground.